Hello. This is Genesis chapter 37. Somebody told me that they had never studied Genesis. And I said, well, if you give it another week or two, you should be through all 50 chapters of Genesis. And that's a huge goal. It's a wonderful thing to think that you've done. You've opened up the world to something that you've spent maybe your whole life doing and you didn't really know that much about it. So now you do, and I'm thrilled by that. But Exodus is even better. Leviticus will blow your mind. And Numbers, which really a better title for Numbers is the wilderness, because that's what the Hebrews called it. Uh, it's really good. It's chock full of stuff. And then Deuteronomy, which almost nobody reads, is an amazing sermon by Moses right before they go into the promised land. So if you've never studied any of that, I highly recommend it. And we're going to do it. Might take a few months, but we're going to get there. So just hang with me. So this is Genesis 37. I'm going to read from the complete Jewish Bible. I'm toying with not reading all of the scripture, just kind of pieces of it. Let me know what you think. I don't mind doing it either way, but for time, I may skip some things just to make it a little faster. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't matter. Let me know. So, chapter 37 of Genesis. Yaakov continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner in the land of Canaan. Here's the history of Yaakov, which is Jacob. That's the Hebrew pronunciation. When Joseph was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still a boy. Once, when he was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph the most of all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long-sleeved robe. When his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk to him in a civil manner. Now, a lot of us have heard it's a Technicolor dream coat. That makes a way better Broadway play, but actually it was just a royal kind of robe with the long sleeves. It wasn't as cool as the Broadway play. But Joseph had a dream in which he told his brothers, another mistake, uh, and that made them hate him all the more. He said to them, listen, while I tell you about this dream of mine. We were tying up bundles of wheat in the field when suddenly my bundle got up by itself and stood upright. Then your bundles came, gathered around mine, and prostrated themselves before it. His brothers retorted, yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around. And they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he had said. Now remember, he's wearing this royal tunic, so he's essentially dressed like a prince or a king when he's telling them this story. So he had another dream, which he told his brothers because he didn't learn the first time. Here I had another dream, and there were the sun, the moon, and 11 stars prostrating themselves before me. He told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. What is this dream you have had? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate themselves before you on the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. After this, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, Israel asked Joseph, aren't your brothers pasturing the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them, he answered. Here I am, he said to him. Go now, and see whether things are going well with your brothers and with the sheep, and bring back word to me. So he sent him away from the Hebron valley, and he went to Shechem, where a man found him wandering around the countryside. The man asked him, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers, he answered. Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the sheep? The man said, they've left here because I've heard them say, let's go to Dothan. Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. So they spotted him in the distance, and before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. They said to each other, look, this dreamer is coming, so come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these water cisterns here, which is just a well. Then we'll say some wild animals devoured him. We'll see then what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard this, he saved him from being destroyed by them. He said, we shouldn't take his life. Don't shed blood, Reuben added. Throw him in this cistern here in the wilds, but don't lay hands on him yourselves. He intended to rescue him from them later and restore him to his father. Remember, Reuben had something to lose here. He was going to be in trouble. So it was that when Joseph arrived to be with his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the long-sleeved robe he was wearing, and took him and threw him in the cistern. Then they sat down and ate their meal, but as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Amalekites coming from Gilead, their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium on their way down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What advantage is it for us if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" I know you would think I'd be able to read this better if I'm going to keep doing this, but come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers paid attention to him. So when Midian merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for half a pound of silver shekels to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph on to Egypt. Reuben returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Joseph wasn't in it, tore his clothes in mourning. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I go now?" So he may be dead, and I'm worried about myself. They took Joseph's robe, killed a male goat, dipped the robe in the blood. Then they sent the long-sleeved robe and brought it to their father. "We found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not?" He recognized it and cried, "It's my son's robe. Some wild animal has torn Joseph in pieces and eaten him." Yaakov tore his clothes and, putting on sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused all consolation, saying, "No, I will go down to the grave to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midian sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, a captain's guard. So the Midianite traders got down to Egypt and they sold him to Potiphar. So Joseph is about 17. He's living in Canaan with his father. And in verse 2, we see where he sells out his brother. He turns in a bad report on him. If you have multiple kids, you probably at some point told them, "You keep telling on your brother or sister, they're eventually going to take it out on you." And that's basically what happens. But the sons of Jacob had 4 different baby moms. So if you're a step parent, you see how this favoritism works, and the kids get a little bent out of shape with that kind of stuff. But Jacob favored Rachel. That was who he first loved. And so, of course, he favored the 2 sons that she gave him, Joseph and Benjamin. So giving him that royal tunic, that robe, essentially anointed him as prince. So essentially to them, what it did was make him the firstborn, even though he wasn't. And so his father ceremonially, or kind of ceremonially, announced him as prince, but not formally. It was more of a kind of a play on words at the time. So picture this teenager standing there in this royal tunic, telling his brothers that, "Hey, you all are going to worship me. It's going to go great." Then he has another dream, and this one, the sun represents the father, and the moon the mother, and the stars were all their offspring. So now he said, not only mom and dad, but the whole family's going to worship me. So Joseph was saying his brothers and his mothers would bow, basically, which you did not do unless it was something greater than you. And dream interpretation was a spiritual gift for Joseph, although he had not quite understood that yet, and the ability to share it, he probably should have kept to himself a little bit more, but eventually that's going to come in handy with him. Jacob and his sons had no fear of going to Shechem, even though a few years earlier, that's when the king's son raped their sister, and they basically killed all the males in the city and then took all their stuff and their women and children. So it was about 50 miles. And these brothers believed that the dreams of Joseph being their master were true. They didn't like he said it. They didn't like they were true, but they also understood there were things that Joseph did that made it seem like these could be true. They had reason to believe that they were true. And they didn't like that. Nobody wants their youngest brother to be the master. So Reuben says, don't kill Joseph. And sometimes we read that, oh, Reuben was so sweet, he's trying to save his brother. No, see, Reuben had slept with his father's concubine. So he had already made a kind of an overthrow initiative there. And so the last thing he wanted to do was to lose his father's favorite son on his watch. He was the oldest one is responsible for everything. And a lot of times you were held personally responsible for anything your siblings did. I've always liked that rule, mostly because I'm the youngest. So I think my siblings should kind of pay for my mistakes, I guess you could say. So uh, Reuben was also kind of planning. He was going to be the hero too, because he was going to save his brother. Probably he would have sold out his other brother. So um, he was still kind of considered the top dog, so he would have had some power. But uh, Reuben, who had the most to lose, would be the one who tried to rescue him. As the eldest, he would be responsible for the whole group. So a couple of chapters ago, they killed all the men of Shechem because their sister had been raped. So it really shouldn't surprise us that much after deciding they're going to kill their brother. They just sat down for lunch. These are humans. These are regular people, brothers, men that have egos and jealousy and pride and stupidity and everything else, just like the rest of us. So shouldn't be too shocking. They were kind of harsh like that. Now Judah says, let's sell him to the Arabs. That way, whatever happens is not on us. Now, Ishmaelites and Arabs, the same thing. But basically what he's saying is, let's find a way for him to actually die, but it won't be our fault. We never do that, right? Like try to find a loophole. It's like God won't really blame me because technically it's your fault. Or he didn't say this or whatever. We always try to find a loophole. And God teaches very clearly that he's not about you finding a loophole. That's not the goal anyway. So Reuben tore his garment, sign of mourning. We've seen that in the past. And this is because, partly because he's mourning, he thinks his brother might be dead, but probably, mostly he's mourning because he's going to be held responsible. Jacob's going to personally exact revenge on him for losing his son. So we see he gets sold off to Potiphar, and Potiphar is really a common Egyptian name. It really means dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian sun god. So we don't know his actual name, but essentially he was a big deal in Egypt that we're going to see even more about in chapter 38. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's chapter 37. And a lot of times the version matters. And I say that a lot. I didn't really point it out this time, but it is kind of important when you read through it, because like verse 6 says, now Israel loved Joseph the most of all his children. And so it's like we've always suspected it, but this actually states it. But in verse 3, it says, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. And you miss the fact that really why he loves him is because he was born of the woman he loved the most, that he did not, love all of his wives the same. He loved Rachel the most. She was the most special to him. So God bless. I hope you enjoyed that. Share, like, comment, give me some feedback. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.